Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. My name is Nick Marro with Occupy Fantasy. I am once again here to help you break down tonight's NBA DFS slate on both DraftKings and FanDuel. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. If you haven't already, please like the video. Also, subscribe to the channel. That helps us get more free content like this out to you. Also, if you're not already a member of Occupy Fantasy, check the links in the description below. As a member, you get access to the model you see here I'll be using throughout this video, a single lineup builder, a multi-lineup builder. We also have a private Discord server full of seasoned DFS pros to help you improve your game. That includes a 30-minute window leading up to each slate's lock where you can ask your lineup and slate-specific questions as well. So we got a nice six-game slate tonight. I've been out for about a week. I was down in Florida for a work thing. Great to be back. Very excited to break down this slate with you. We have most of the injury reports. Oddly enough, the one team we don't are my Nets, but we can talk through each of these teams game by game. I get a DraftKings window open. Oh, I just had to change my password um, because sports betting is now legal in Massachusetts. Um, but yeah, let's pull up a DraftKings window, a FanDuel window as well. I'm going to slowly build lineups as we talk through this video so you kind of see where we're at as far as lineup construction is concerned. Let's see here. Lobby loading. But yeah, obviously very excited to have legal sports betting in Mass now. But let's get into this slate here. Again, 6 games should be pretty easy to get through. First game on the slate, we have 2 games in this 7 o'clock window. We have the Hawks at the Wizards. The Hawks are 1.5 point favorites on the road. We're looking at a 238-point game total here, so a very healthy total. No major injury news for the Hawks. Only G League players are hurt. Same with the Wizards. So we got 2 healthy teams here. Obviously, when there's healthy teams, it's going to be tougher to find value. Everyone's kind of priced where they should be. All that being said, it's tough to ignore a game with such a high total. I do like DeJounte Murray on both sides, especially on DK. 7,700 feels a bit too cheap given his median production. John Collins is cheap here. Hasn't been outstanding, but at 4,200 on DK, they're kind of begging you to play this guy right now. I'm going to check out his game log. The only reason I really look at game logs are for minutes. Like, obviously, you don't want to base too much on your decision making on just a 1 or 2 game sample. But if we see he's getting full run, and he is. He played 29 minutes against the Wizards last time out. Scored around 25 fantasy points. So Collins looks good here. Pretty risky given his recent inconsistencies. There is a new coach there in Atlanta now with Quinn Snyder, but I think as we move forward, we should see Collins around 30 minutes on a night-to-night basis. So at 4,200 on a slate where we're kind of lacking value, I don't mind that at all. I'm going to go ahead and pencil him in on DK. Over on FanDuel, 5,100, totally reasonable. I don't think we have to force that yet. Um, like I said, DeJounte Murray looks good here. If you can afford Trae Young, he's one of the better guard plays on the slate. No surprises there. Clint Capella's been better lately, seeing a few more minutes with the new coach in. Bogdan Hunter as secondary plays, they're viable, but neither are really priorities for me. So the priorities here as things stand will be John Collins over on DK. I like both guards, Murray and Young on both sites. Tough to really call either a core play given the quality of the pay-ups we have on the short slate. But yeah, they're both certainly interesting. I don't mind Collins over on FanDuel either. Power forward eligible, but at 5,100, I don't know that we need to go ahead and force that in just yet. We're seeing a lot of ownership going to DeAndre Hunter on the wing. He's viable at a thin forward position, but again, not really the type of player I'm ever looking to call a core or prioritize. So moving over onto the Wizard side of things, just a couple G League injuries with them there as well. Porzingis on DK looks really good. 9,100 feels a bit too cheap given what he does on a night-to-night basis. Denny Avila looks fine. Bradley Beal, Kuzma, right. The thing is, Morris is back. We're seeing a lot of ownership going to Delon Wright, but I would encourage you to proceed with caution there. Um, Let's take a look. Yeah, Wright's been really solid lately, playing over 30 minutes per night. But how many of those games have come with Morris out of the lineup? That's my question. Morris did return last time out, only played 16 minutes though. So it's yet to be seen if they do see Wright as the starting point guard for them moving forward. Keep it on the starting lineup. If Wright's in, I do think he's good value. If he's coming off the bench though, that ownership is ridiculous, and you're going to want to get off of him in tournaments. Don't mind Bradley Beal on either side. Feels a little bit overpriced, especially on FanDuel at 9K, but on a short slate, I can see getting to him. Kyle Kuzma sub 8K, fine as well. So the big three of Porzingis, Beal, Kuzma all look fine. I really like Porzingis over on DK if I'm picking any of them there. Over on FanDuel, I guess it's Kuzma just because he's sub 8K, but I think he's a little bit riskier than both Beal or Porzingis. So a lot to like here from a tournament angle. As far as like cash games and single entries go, there's really nothing I'm forcing. Proceed with some caution on DeLon Wright. I see he's getting a ton of ownership on both sites, but if Monte Morris sees his minutes kind of ramped up here, working his way back from an injury, that could really cut into Wright's production. So just proceed with caution on that one. I will say I do like Daniel Gafford even with his team healthy. He's just a cheap center with upside, 5K flat on DK, 5,600 on FanDuel, but kind of boom and bust by nature, so not something you necessarily have to force. All right, so we can move into the next game on the slate now. We have the Portland Trailblazers at the 76ers. Sixers are 9-point favorites at home. We're looking at a 232.5 point game total here. Um, no major injury news for Philly, just a couple G Leaguers. Mac McClung back down with the G League. Not exactly surprised by that one. Over on the Portland side, no Arcidiacono. Anthony Simons is questionable. Still no Justice Winslow. So the Simons news is important, but I want to start on the Philadelphia side of things. This is a nice pace up for them. Against the Blazers, not a tough team defensively as far as an opponent goes. So if you can afford Harden, you can afford Embiid. They're both fine. On a 6-game slate, when you could get either of them sub 10%, there's certainly appeal to playing them in tournaments. We've seen better games out of Tobias Harris lately. I couldn't fault someone for going there. Pretty inconsistent. Definitely prefer him on DK where he's sub 6K, but in play on both sides at a thin forward position. Then Tyrese Maxey, very popular on FanDuel just because of that price. I think 6,600 does feel a little bit too cheap for him. Don't mind him. Solid play. Not something I'm forcing or prioritizing, but when you look at that ownership on FanDuel, it's going to be tough to get away from. Obviously, the guard defense for Portland is not great. Just their entire defense in general is not great. I really don't believe in going position by position on defense, like DVOP or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's at least notable that he's in an excellent matchup here. That being Tyrese Maxey. I'm going to take a look at him. When I'm seeing him over 30% owned, that kind of tells me you should probably be going there in cash games. Playing over 30 minutes per night, excellent matchup. Only 6,600. Why not? Let's go ahead and get some Maxey over on FanDuel. And then yeah, I mean the only other player drawing a ton of ownership is Anthony Melton. I imagine we do see him continue to start, but he has a very wide range of outcomes. Very low floor in the single digits, very high ceiling, 20 to 40 fantasy points. So while he is very popular, I definitely trust Maxey much more. Probably won't get to Melton much unless I'm playing a bunch of lineups in large field tournaments. So again, Harden and Embiid look great on both sides if you can afford them. Probably wouldn't want both in one lineup. If one's really having a ceiling game, it's tough to expect the other will as well. And then Harris is fine. Maxi I like a lot. Even at 7,500 on DK, I could see getting the sum of him. Melton's in play as value, but really not a priority for me. All right, so let's move over onto the Portland side of things. Portland is getting healthier. Yusuf Nurkic back in the lineup. Jeremy Grant is healthy. Nice to see this team getting healthy. Matisse Thybulle still pretty cheap. I mean, even with Nurk in the lineup, we have seen him continue to get rebounds. That's something definitely to keep an eye on. I've been a little bit baffled by how good he's been for fantasy, but yeah, he's come back down to earth these past couple games. Like I said, I've been a little bit out of it, dealing with some work stuff, so it's no surprise to me to come back and see Thybulle's kind of fallen back down to earth. 11 fantasy points last game, or 2 games ago, 7 the game um, last time out. So yeah, I think Dyble's in play here unless we get more value to open up throughout the day. But he's the type of play we like in the morning, and then by the time the slate locks and there's actually good value plays, you could probably just get away from Matisse Thybulle altogether. 20% ownership almost on FanDuel. That's way too high to me. I'd probably just avoid him. I will say this though, Anthony Simon's questionable. If he's out, that should boost guys like Reddish, Thybulle, maybe a little bit for Grant and Dame as well. Dame definitely a much higher ceiling with Simons out of the lineup, so keep an eye on this one. Where he's priced at sub 11K with Simons in, I think he's okay in a tough matchup against Philly. But with Simons out, he becomes one of the better pay up options on the slate. So we have to keep an eye on that Anthony Simons news. If Simons is in, he's GPP viable, but not a priority. But again, if he's out, big boost to Dame, bigger than I think the field will account for. And we're seeing him right around 5% owned on both sites. So a very appealing play there. And even with Simons in, Dame has upside. So don't be afraid to go to that one. The other good news is that is the first game on the slate in that 7 o'clock window. So we should have that news and starting lineup. All right, let's move into the next game on the slate now. We have the Nuggets and the Spurs. Nuggets. Zeke Naji is out, and that's it. I think that's the only significant piece of news here. Konkar is questionable as well. Um, so yeah, we got a very wide spread here in this one, 13 points. We're looking at a 236 point game total. First and foremost, we love Jokic tonight. Obviously, there's some blowout risk, but if you can afford him, he's the highest ceiling on the slate, competing for that MVP right now with Embiid, who's also on the slate. Not that there's any sort of narrative there, but who's in the better matchup? I think it's certainly these Nuggets against a terrible, terrible Spurs team. So if you can afford Jokic and you can stomach a little bit of blowout risk, it could pay off for you big time. They are on the road. Maybe San Antonio can keep this game close. They're healthier than they've been recently. All that being said, I mean, I totally don't fault someone for trying to go more balanced. We just really don't have great value on the slate as things stand. Reggie Jackson drawing a lot of ownership, a little bit surprising to me, but he has been getting decent run behind Jamal Murray. Let's go ahead and take a look at what he's been up to. Yeah, I mean, they got him on the buyout market. He's had a couple big games, a couple crappy games, and I think that's what you got to expect from him here. Again, similar to Matisse Thybulle, right now he looks like a decent value play, but I'm hoping we get better value throughout the day. So a situation certainly to keep an eye on. And Reggie Jackson, a player over 20% owned, not something I'm really rushing to get to. Jamal Murray looks good here. Again, some blowout risk, obviously. Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, all the starters are solid options. They're all healthy now. Porter and Gordon have both been out a little bit over the past couple of weeks, but seeing this team healthy is going to take Bruce Brown out of consideration for me. You can maybe get to some KCP if he starts, but yeah, scoring dependent guard, very much boom or bust. It's really Jokic or bust here for me. Really, really like him on both sides, and I think even if it is a blowout, he could probably get you there 60, 70 fantasy points in 3 quarters against a very soft San Antonio defense. So over on the Spurs side of things, they're about as healthy as they've been all season. Ken Birch is out. That's really the only piece of injury news we have to keep an eye on, or we really don't even have to keep an eye on it. He's already ruled out. So Vassell's back. He looks good here. 5,600 on DK feels too cheap. I'm probably going to go ahead and pencil him in. Another player working his way back from an injury, so Pop has been kind of cautious with minutes. But yeah, we're seeing him pushing 30 minutes now. I think we can go to him and feel pretty good about it. I like the price at 5,600 for even like 26 to 28 minutes on Vassell. So he's a play I could definitely see getting to on both sides. Correlates well with Joker as well. If Jokic is going off into the fourth quarter, it's a good chance the game is relatively close, and Devin Vassell is likely the main reason for that. So Vassell's fine here. Don't mind Keldon Johnson. Feels a little bit overpriced with this team now healthy. Jeremy Sochan looks good. Trey Jones is fine. Really no priorities here. Zach Collins kind of priced out of consideration for me. I've been playing him a lot as a power forward on FanDuel, but now that he's over 7K, it's tough for me to stomach, even on a limited 6-game slate. So yeah, the priorities here, it's really just Devin Vassell for me. I can see getting to the other starters. Trey Jones on FanDuel, where we're lacking guard value, but at the same time, I'm really not excited about it. I will just quickly shout out Charles Bassey coming off the bench. If this game is a blowout or we do see Zach Collins get in foul trouble against Jokic, Bassey is the type of player on a short slate who could really help you climb a leaderboard. Very, very low floor. I'd say like 3 out of 4 times he's not going to pay off salary for you, but in that one time he does out of those 4, that's the type of player that can help you win a tournament. So depending on your risk tolerance, don't mind some Charles Bassey here, but other than Devin Vassell, really nothing I'm loving from the Spurs. And that being said, Vassell's much better over on DK. He's 6,500 on FanDuel. All right, next team on the slate now, we have the Nets at the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves are 4.5 point favorites at home. No surprise there. Just going to refresh my injury report, see if the Nets stuff came out yet. I can't imagine it has. They were on a back-to-back. Definitely let some people down last night. Yeah, so Bridges started, played pretty well, got benched at half. Cam Thomas was pretty terrible. All of a sudden started going off late. But guys like Joe Harris, Seth Curry were limited as well. So really, if you were playing Nets last night, other than like Day'Ron Sharp, it was really tough to feel good about anything. Jock Vaughn just playing with the rotations, clearly resting guys against Milwaukee, and then they almost won the game. So it was pretty frustrating that they didn't put Bridges back in. But regardless, they should be healthy and good to go tonight. The 2 pieces of injury news I'm keeping an eye on are Nick Claxton and Cam Johnson. They both have legitimate injuries. I think they could go tonight. Again, no injury report here with this team being on a back-to-back. But yeah, I think they'll both play. If Cam Johnson's in, he looks great on both sides, especially on FanDuel at 5,800. Definitely keep an eye on the news here. I know he's a little bit banged up, but I think he's going to be good to go. So 5,800 on FanDuel, that's a core play for me over there and a great matchup. Um, Don't mind him in 6K on DK either. Royce O'Neal, if he's starting again, 3,800 on DK feels too cheap. 4,500 on FanDuel looks solid there as well. Again, a slate where we're lacking value right now. He looks really good to me, but I'm hoping we get better value throughout the day. But assuming we don't, a player like Royce O'Neal, a guy who's going to play 34 to 36 minutes, just a 3,800. I mean, that's the type of play that you're going to need if you want to get to some of the payups like Joker, Dame, Embiid, etc. So, like O'Neal on both sides, don't love him. Kind of a limited upside, but the minutes are there for him on a slate we're lacking value. Dinwiddie looks good, better on DK where he's 7,300. Mikal Bridges, 8,200 on DK. Really, really, really like him over there. And the 9K price on FanDuel feels a little bit inflated, but at the same time, I mean, he does have upside, so I could certainly see going to him. If Claxton is in, he's great. If he's out, we probably see Nerlens Noel or Day'Ron Sharp get the start. Sharp, the much better fantasy producer of the two, but he's going to be tough to trust coming off the bench. So keep an eye on this. If Claxton is in, he's a good play, especially on DK at 6,700. If Claxton's out, I think you could look to either of the other two centers for Brooklyn, but Day'Ron Sharp's the better play of the two, even if Noel gets the nod. So keep an eye on that situation. I'm not really interested in Curry or Harris, even though they were rested last night. Just very, very scoring dependent. And the low floor isn't really outweighed by a high ceiling. They kind of have limited upside. And yeah, so it's tough to trust anything here other than Spence, Mikal, Cam, Nick Claxton if he's in, Royce O'Neal just because of his price. But it is a good game environment and what should be a competitive game. So we got to keep an eye on this injury report, but there will be a lot to like here for the Brooklyn Nets. Over on the Minnesota side of things, still no Karl Anthony Towns, no Jalen Noel either. Really no surprises. But with Noel out, we are seeing a few more minutes for guys like Kyle Anderson and Jaden McDaniels. Nikhil Alexander Walker could see enough run to become viable as a value play, but he's certainly risky, especially coming off the bench. Rudy Gobert in a great matchup here. Much better if Claxton sits, but at the same time, 7K flat on DK certainly feels too cheap. I could even go ahead right now and pencil him in. I just love him at that price in a matchup against the Nets team who even with Claxton in hasn't been great as in terms of front court defense. Like Claxton's a good one-on-one defender, but Gobert should be able to get his here in a spot like this. He's been much better with Mike Conley at the point. But yeah, I'd also consider Kyle Anderson kind of a core play just because we are lacking value. Forward is very thin, and he has consistently been hitting value at that price point. So I'll go ahead and pencil in some Kyle Anderson. But yeah, good game environment, a lot to like here. And one other player I should probably be talking about is Anthony Edwards. One of the higher ceilings on the board over on FanDuel, where you're only paying 8,800. That's a core play for me over there. He's 9,500 on DK. I like him as a tournament play there, but he's not something I'd say is a priority. But again, sub 9K in a great matchup with Brooklyn. It's tough for me not to want to get to some Anthony Edwards. Really, whoever you see end up starting for this Minnesota team is going to be good. I'm not crazy about Alexander Walker, but he could see a little bit of extra run here with Noel out of the lineup. I'll take a quick look at his game log. I'm a little bit surprised by how owned he is right now. I think it's more a product of the slate and just that we're lacking value. You see how inconsistent he is. He's only gone over 20 fantasy points one of his last like 5 games, but that game was huge and you did need him if you were trying to climb leaderboards, but at the same time, just very, very, very risky. So I probably won't get to him as much as the field. Really do like Rudy Gobert and Kyle Anderson, though. And then if you can't afford Anderson, Jaden McDaniels is a nice little consolation. A little bit cheaper, similar type play in that he's not going to score a ton, but he's going to get you minutes. He could get you stocks, and he could get you there to value other ways. So priorities here for me, Rudy Gobert, Kyle Anderson on both sides. Jaden McDaniels looks good. Wouldn't call him a priority though. And then Mike Conley on FanDuel, 5,500. Missed him as well. He feels a little bit too cheap. Where I already have Anthony Edwards, I'm just gonna have to ask myself how many of these Timberwolves I want in my lineup. Um, but yeah, I mean Conley is cheap enough to justify that price tag for sure. Pretty inconsistent. We see the floor games out of him. I think that was a blowout with Philadelphia though. So you could get to Conley. Not going to core him right now because I do have Edwards. But yeah, tons to like from Minnesota. Again, no injury report yet for Brooklyn. Keep an eye on it. I do think Claxton and Johnson play, but if they don't, that could open up additional minutes and usage for other starters. All right, enough time on that game. Moving into the next one, we have the Cavs at the Heat. The Heat are 2-point favorites at home. Starting the Cavs side of the things, Darius Garland is questionable. That is massive, massive news. That's really it. Dylan Windler's out. Isaiah Mobley. Nothing else we really need to talk about. But let's say Garland is out tonight. If Garland's out, Donovan Mitchell becomes a priority everywhere. He'd become one of the best plays on the slate. It also wouldn't surprise me to see Ricky Rubio slide in the starting lineup in the absence of Darius Garland, in which case Rubio would become one of the best value plays on the board. Um, Even well before they had Rubio in the rotation, whenever Garland was out, we'd see Levert slide in the starting lineup. If that's the case, then I like Levert as well. So if Garland's in, there's nothing I love here for the Cavs. Tough matchup against Miami, but if Garland's out, we're gonna have to look to Mitchell as one of the better payups on the board. Ricky Rubio, regardless of whether he starts or comes off the bench, he's gonna be too cheap for his role with no Garland. And then if Karis LeVert gets the nod here as a starter with Garland out of the lineup, he's gonna look excellent. So all the games we've talked to so far, this is the biggest piece of news that we need to keep an eye on. That's Darius Garland. If he's out, there's going to be a lot to like for Cleveland, even in a tough matchup against Miami. If he's in, really don't love anything here. You could get to Garland or Mitchell as tournament plays. Allen looks fine in the front court. Don't mind Evan Mobley either. But it's going to be really tough to trust anything if this team is fully healthy in such a bad matchup. But again, just to reemphasize, Darius Garland is the most important news on the slate as things stand. If he's in, you don't really have to force any Cavs. If he's out, though, all the other starters are going to look great. If LeVert starts, he's going to be a priority. Rubio is going to look great as value. And then Donovan Mitchell is going to be a very, very strong play as well. Over on the Miami side of things, Kevin Love is probable. Still no Kyle Lowry, no Nikola Jovic. I think he's down with the G League. So a healthy team here in Miami. Tough matchup against Cleveland. Bam, Butler, Hero, all okay plays. But yeah, just a really ugly matchup. Did I even mention the game total here? 212.5. That's like 10 points lower than all the other games on the board. So nothing I'm forcing here. I imagine one of these guys, Bam, Butler, Hero, have a really good night, but it's tough to know which of the three. So unless you want to play that guessing game, I'd rather use that salary elsewhere because it's not like any of them are cheap. You can maybe go to Gabe Vincent as value with Lowry out of the lineup. He's really fallen back down to earth, though. Just hasn't been great lately. We've seen some good games out of Oladipo. Both he and Kevin Love are cheap enough to consider as last man in value type plays, but there's just no priorities for me on this Miami team in a matchup with Cleveland when they're fully healthy. So that should become a surprise to no one, or be a surprise to no one, rather. Okay. Still shaking off some rust here, but we're on the last game on the slate now. We got the Raptors at the Lakers. 224.5 point game total. Raptors are 2.5 point favorites on the road. So, obviously, still no LeBron. That's massive news for the Lakers. But tonight they're also going to be without Mo Bamba. D'Angelo Russell is back. He's listed as probable. Could cut into the usage of the other starters. But really, still love AD here. If you could afford AD, he looks excellent. I do slightly prefer Jokic, but if you don't want to deal with that blowout risk, AD is probably one of your best pay up options on the board. I love him on both sites. 11K on DK, totally reasonable. 11.5 on FanDuel, reasonable as well. He did hit the locker room last time out, but it was nice to see him jump back into the game. Some toughness out of Anthony Davis lately, which is certainly a sight for sore eyes or fans of the Lakers. Yeah, just consistently over 50 fantasy points. Oh, it's tough. I think he might be a little bit safer than Jokic. I don't think he quite has the same ceiling, so you kind of have to pick between the two. I don't think you can fit both in a lineup, given the lack of value we have right now. But for me, I'm going to side with AD slightly. I really like him here. Not the best matchup against Toronto, but with LeBron out, he's still going to see massive usage, even with D'Angelo Russell on the floor. Russell, his presence should actually open up a few looks for Davis here as well. So Davis is the prize. He is the priority. I like Malik Beasley on both sides. Don't love him though. Same with Jared Vanderbilt. These are all kind of mid-range options you could consider. We've seen some big games out of Austin Reeves at 4,700 on DK. I could see getting to him a little bit over there. But really, I mean, the pieces I like on LA are just Anthony Davis. Don't mind D'Angelo Russell, but he's going to be tough to trust as he's still working back from that injury. And then Schroeder's overpriced now that Russell's back in the lineup. So you're really just dealing with these like secondary fringe type plays other than Anthony Davis. But again, I love Anthony Davis. I think he's probably the best play on the entire slate. So definitely get some shares of him tonight. All right, over on the Toronto side of things, we have Danilo Blanton out. Will Barton is probable, not really in the rotation consistently though. Otto Porter still out as well. Then we got a bunch of G Leaguers. So similar to Miami or Cleveland, if Garland is in, this is a healthy team price where they should be. So I am interested in Van Fleet. I think he is a little bit too cheap. 8,300 on DK, 8,400 over on FanDuel. Could definitely see getting to some of him. Just checking what I have left per player if I want to pencil these guys in yet or not. Um, Not yet. I think Jakob Poeltl's fine as a center option. I'd rather get to Rudy Gobert for a little bit more expensive, but at the same time, Poeltl's fine. Definitely going to get him in pretty reasonably owned. He is pushing 20%. I expect we see that come down throughout the day. Siakam looks fine here, sub 9K. That's about as cheap as he's been all season. Obviously, a very high ceiling against a spotty Lakers defense. Don't mind Barnes and a newbie Trent. Boucher's had some big games off the bench. I'm not really trusting him here. So again, just a healthy team, priced where they should be. It is a good matchup though. So Van Fleet, my favorite Raptor here. Also like Siakam in large field tournaments. Don't mind Jakob Poeltl, their centers I prefer, and then OG, Barnes, Trent, all in play, but none are really priorities. So let's quickly recap the slate. Sorting by OF index, we see Jokic and Davis towards the top. No surprise there. And Embiid up there as well. Great matchup against Portland, even if Nurkic is in. James Harden, fine. Lillard, Trey, Edwards. No surprises when we're sorting by OF index. These are the top raw point plays on the board, kind of combined with opportunity and upside and things like that. So no surprises there. Quickly sorting by DK value, I mean, Collins popping a lot over on DK. We talked about him. We have Kyle Anderson penciled in. Michael Porter Jr., I didn't really touch on, but 5,700 does feel a little bit too cheap for him. No surprise that Hunter's drawing ownership at a thin forward position where he's just around 5K. And then quickly taking a look at FanDuel, their top value play tonight's Anthony Edwards. I mean, 8,800 is just way too cheap for what he's capable of in this matchup. Hunter, Collins, both look fine. Cam Johnson, if he's in, is a core play. Matisse Thybulle, really not going to get there unless Anthony Simons is out of the lineup. And even if he is out of the lineup, he's not someone you can trust at around 19% owned. But if that ownership comes down, I can see maybe getting to him. But yeah, you're probably picking between AD and Joker tonight. For me, I'm leaning AD. Looking at DK, we got value like Royce O'Neal in there. Don't love it. Would prefer to see him starting. But Gobert, Collins, Anderson, Vassell, all a little bit too cheap for their upside. Then over on FanDuel, we got Maxey, Edwards, who we just talked about, Kyle Anderson, AD, Cam Johnson. Nice little course to start. Just a 6-game slate. I'm hoping we get more value throughout the day. As always, my name is Nick Marro. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit me with that follow. Also, check the links in the description below. Sign up to Occupy Fantasy if you're not already a member. Have some fun tonight, everyone, and let's make some money. Happy Friday.